Hi there, boys and girls. Today for story time, we're going to read Little Miss Trouble by Roger Hargreaves. Now, I have to warn you, there's some things in this story that would get you in trouble that are not very nice. You'll see what I'm talking about. Here comes trouble, people used to say. And who do you think would come walking along? That's right, Little Miss Trouble. And oh, the trouble she caused. One morning she went to see Mr. Uppity. "Do you know what Mr. Small calls you behind your back?" she asked him. "No," replied Mr. Uppity. "What does Mr. Small call me behind my back?" Little Miss Trouble looked at him. "Fatty," she said. Oh dear. She said Mr. Small calls him Fatty? That's not kind. That's not nice at all. That will get you in trouble. Now, Mr. Uppity didn't like that. Not at all. Not one little bit. He went to see Mr. Small. "How dare you call me Fatty?" he shouted. But, stammered Mr. Small, who had never called him Fatty. But nothing, shouted Mr. Uppity. Mr. Small, in fact, had not called him Fatty. And he hit poor Mr. Small. Ouch! And he gave him a black eye. Poor Mr. Small. Well, you shouldn't call people names. You shouldn't hit them. And you shouldn't tell stories that are not true. Mr. Small did not call Mr. Uppity Fatty. That's not nice. Little Miss Trouble, who was hiding behind a tree, hugged herself with glee. "Oh, I do make some trouble, or I do like making some trouble," she giggled to herself. Naughty girl. She was playing a trick and laughing about it. And Mr. Small just got hit. Not nice. Little Miss Trouble then went to see Mr. Clever. "Do you know what Mr. Small calls you behind your back?" she asked him. "No," replied Mr. Clever. "Tell me, what does Mr. Small call me behind my back?" Little Miss Trouble looked at him. "Big Nose," she said. Now, Mr. Clever didn't like that very much either, and off he rushed. And when he found Mr. Small, without waiting for an explanation, he punched him hard. Are you starting to see the trouble that Little Miss Trouble causes? He punched Mr. Small in the other eye. Poor Mr. Small, 2 black eyes for something he'd never done. "Oh, look at you," Little Miss Trouble laughed when she saw him. "It's all your fault," said Mr. Small. "True," she said, and she walked off, giggling. She had told lies that got Mr. Small hurt. Poor Mr. Small had to go to the doctor. "Good heavens!" exclaimed Dr. Make-You-Well when he saw him. "Whatever happened to you?" Mr. Small explained. "I think," Dr. Make-You-Well said, when he heard what Mr. Small had to tell him, "that something should be done about that little lady. What she needs is—" Then he stopped. Then he chuckled. "That's it," he laughed. "What's it?" said Mr. Small. And the Dr. Make-You-Well whispered something to Mr. Small. Would you like to know what he whispered? I'm not telling you. It's a secret. He knows what to do about Little Miss Trouble. That afternoon, Mr. Small went to see Mr. Tickle. And do you know what Little Miss Trouble calls you behind your back? He asked. No, said Mr. Tickle. What does Little Miss Trouble call me behind my back? Mr. Small looked at him. Pudding face, he said. Then Mr. Small went to see Mr. Bump. Do you know what Little Miss Trouble calls you behind your back? He asked. No, said Mr. Bump. What does Little Miss Trouble call me behind my back? Mr. Small looked at him. Mr. Nitwit, he said. Now, I don't really like the way Mr. Small is acting. He's doing the same thing little Miss Trouble is doing. Again, not good choices. Little Miss Trouble was in trouble. How dare you call me Pudding Face, cried Mr. Tickle, and he tickled her. How dare you call me Mr. Nitwit, cried Mr. Bump, and he bumped into her. Now, I don't know whether you've ever been tickled and bumped at the same time, but it's not much fun. In fact, it's no fun at all. Tickle bump, tickle bump, tickle bump, tickle bump, for 10 minutes. And 10 minutes of tickle bumping is a long time, I can tell you. Later that evening, Dr. Makewell strolled around to see Mr. Small. How are your eyes? He asked. Oh, much better now, thank you, replied Mr. Small. And did our little plan work? Asked the doctor. Indeed, grinned Mr. Small. Let's shake, said Dr. Makewell, and they shook hands. Well, not quite hands. Mr. Hands Small is so small, he could only shake a finger. Dr. Makewell then strolled over to see little Miss Trouble. She was feeling very sorry for herself. What's wrong with you? He asked her, and she told him all about it. All about everything. Dr. Makewell looked at her and said, Cheer up. You know what you've just had, don't you? Little Miss Trouble shook her head. She didn't know. You've just had a taste of your own medicine, he chuckled, and he went home for supper. The end. Little Miss Trouble. I hope you boys and girls don't make choices like Little Miss Trouble. She was making up things about other people and saying naughty things that they never said, and that got other people really upset at each other. But I also don't like how Mr. Small started doing the same thing. But I guess that's what Little Miss Trouble deserved. Sometimes when you call names, other kids will call you names back. Or if you hit and kick them, they're probably going to hit and kick you back. They probably won't be friends with you. So please, don't make choices like Little Miss Trouble. Let's make good choices. Okay? I guess this is a good learning lesson so we know how to make better choices. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.